Chosen ones, awaken your soul. The truth is, sometimes we give, we help, and we uplift, not expecting anything in return. Yet, there comes a time when those who once took from us start to remember. It is only when the well runs dry that they realize the value of what they had. And let's be honest, some poisoned the well before complaining about their thirst, never appreciating the gift until it was gone. They never imagined this day would come. They never thought a world without you would hurt more than a world with you. But now, they find themselves struggling to breathe, fighting for the very breath of your life that they carelessly disregarded. You helped him before, and now he remembers. The time has come for you to claim the power of your absence. It's even supported by science. According to psychologists, withdrawal-like symptoms may occur when a crucial person in one's life leaves. Withdrawal indeed, because whether they acknowledge it or not, they were dependent on you for the solace, security, and vitality you provided. They're now starting again, and it's not a pleasant process. They thought there wouldn't be any repercussions for crossing the boundary, but now they're trapped in the space you left. What's the greatest part? Their understanding is just getting started. Hold on tight. The reverberation of their own acts caught them off guard. They never imagined that the consequences of their conduct would be so dire. They were irresponsible at the time, careless with their words, indifferent to your emotions, and behaving as if you were only another moment in their life. They thought you would always be accessible, always be there, and always be prepared to dismiss it and go on as if nothing had occurred. The stillness is different today, however. It's loud, hefty, and entirely theirs to handle. It's not the quiet type. They're beginning to realize that when you lose someone who used to occupy a place in your life, that space doesn't just disappear. Rather, it reverberates, and they are being reminded of all they took for granted by that echo at the moment. Gone are the messages that used to arrive every time. There was little sign of the support they hardly acknowledged. You took away the warmth they never had to ask for. They most likely assured themselves that it wouldn't matter, that everything would be well, and that life would go on as usual. However, they were mistaken, because they never realized how much of their lives revolved on you, your dependability, your presence, and your vitality. Because the things they earlier disregarded were truly the foundation supporting them. They are now having difficulty functioning, and they're floundering without that base. Realizations like these don't come easily. They may divert their attention, seem indifferent, and even persuade others that they don't care. Ultimately, however, when kids are allowed to think for themselves, they are aware of the reality. What occurs when you lose someone who really matters is something they weren't ready for. They believed they could treat you any way they pleased and leave you unpunished. However, life has a way of forcing individuals to confront themselves, and they are now facing the consequences of their own decisions. They equated permanency with your presence. They didn't believe you would really go. They believed you to be permanent, like furniture, constantly accessible, something they could use without any consideration. They saw your forbearance as a limitless supply from which they might continue to draw, your tolerance as weakness, and your constancy as duty. However, individuals are not objects. When people get weary, they go. They're starting to realize how much they depended on you. It was the tiny things, not just the major ones. How you showed there, how you listened, and how you filled in the blanks without being asked. Now that they're gone, they realize all those things they hardly noticed before. They thought you would always be there to make amends, to show empathy, to give them another opportunity. And people stopped appreciating you as a result of that presumption. However, individuals often learn lessons the hard way in life. They are now bearing the consequences of their own negligence. They are seeing how much room you occupied in their universe, and how empty it seems in your absence. Realizing they were never as independent as they believed is more important than just missing you. They only realize it now because it's gone, but they needed the steadiness you provided. Regret comes gradually, during the quiet times, rather than all at once. They were surprised by the lack of your messages, the quiet where your voice had been, and the knowledge that no one else cared as much as you did. And despite their best efforts to divert their attention, they are unable to shake the idea that they caused this to themselves. They now have to face the fact that you weren't permanent, even if they thought you were. They discover too late that regrets cannot turn back time. It's a gradual, creeping thing. Regret. It is not immediately audible and visible. It waits. For a time, it gives them hope that they got away with it and that there won't be any repercussions. Then it creeps in one day when they least expect it. They can't undo what they've done. They realize as a recollection strikes and a scene replays in their mind. They believe that apologizing was like magic, that if they ever felt the need to make amends, they just needed to speak the words, and everything would return to normal. They believed they were in charge of the timetable and could choose when they were ready to show concern. But life isn't like that. Sorry doesn't go back in time. Damage is not repaired by them. When people have had enough, they don't bring them back. They are now beginning to realize that certain things cannot be reversed. The thoughtless words they used, the decisions they made, and the way they treated you like a trash can all have consequences. And just because people feel awful doesn't mean the weight goes away. Even worse, they are aware that you've given them opportunities. More times than they deserved, you showed them tolerance, compassion, and forgiveness. And they squandered each and every one. They are forced to face the unpleasant reality that they could have performed better, but chose not to, because they lost something that was significant to them. And now, no amount of sorrow, no well-crafted apology, and no last-ditch effort to make things right will undo the reality that they made a poor decision at the most critical moment. They believed they had time. They assumed you would wait for them to gather themselves all the time. They now realize, however, that you cannot have a second chance when you lose someone who really cared for you. You just have to accept the remorse. They lost themselves as well, even though they believed that losing you meant losing someone. Losing you meant losing more than just a person. It meant losing a whole aspect of who they were that they were unaware was connected to you. At first, they failed to see it. They believed that all they were giving up was a connection, a friendship, or a relationship. However, as time went on, something began to seem strange. They felt different from the world around them. But more than that, they felt different, and not in a positive way. They no longer have the side you brought out. Perhaps it was a more motivated, lighter, or safer version of themselves. Perhaps it was the version with guidance, understanding, and a support system. However, they also lost that person when they lost you. They are now left with a hardly recognizable version of themselves that seems more drab, empty, and insecure. They were unaware of how much your presence influenced who they were. You inspired them. You believed in their potential, even when they couldn't. And you gave them hope that they could do more. They may have assumed that they will always be that person. Therefore, they may have taken it for granted. But the gaps began to emerge without you, without the vitality you brought into their lives. They no longer see the same person in the mirror as they did when you were around. They see someone letting a genuine opportunity pass them by. They see someone who had something valuable but neglected to safeguard it. The truth is glaring back at them, and they are unable to avoid it. They believe that losing you would just require them to get used to living without you, but in reality, they lost a piece of themselves that they may never regain. They never thought there was a line, therefore, they went over it. They didn't believe in boundaries. They pretended to be able to push limits, test your patience, and take more than they gave. They thought you would always be the greater person, always understand, and always forgive. And they continued because they thought there were no actual repercussions. They disregarded all of the warning indicators, including your hesitations, withdrawals, and changes in energy. They persuaded themselves that you were just going through a phase, and that you would still be there when they turned around, regardless of what they did. They pushed harder as a result. They took more. Since they believed that you were just there, and not someone they had to earn, they completely stopped taking your emotions into account. However, they were mistaken. And now the evidence is your absence. You didn't depart with a spectacular burst. You didn't cause any trouble. You just stopped. Ceased to appear. Quit trying to justify them. Ceased acting as if they had long before gone over the edge. It dawned on them then that this was not another opportunity to maneuver their way through. This really happened. They now bear the burden of their own conceit. They believed that they were exempt from the rules, that they could behave any way they pleased, and that you would never abandon them. But now that they're sitting in the void they made, they understand that boundaries do exist, and that some individuals don't return after they've been passed. They didn't expect to lose, but they played the game. They believed they were in charge. The game included every action they made, every phrase they distorted, and every scenario they created. They believed they were winning. They tried your endurance, your commitment, and your tolerance because they believed that they would always be in charge, no matter how hard they pushed. They thought they had the power to establish the conditions, the guidelines, and the timing and course of events. However, the problem with gaming is that reality ultimately intervenes, and reality doesn't give a damn about their delusions of power. They are now caught up in the disaster they made, even though they believed they could pull the strings. They made a mistake. They believed you would always comply, that you would continue to prove yourself, to strive, to persevere. However, you didn't. You took a step, and suddenly they were the only one left standing, alone, in the game they believed they were winning. They're having trouble now, unable to comprehend how they lost what they believed to be safe. Unable to understand why the same strategies that formerly worked no longer function, struggling to get by without the support, care, and enthusiasm they had taken for granted. After spending so much time attempting to remain ahead of the game, all they can do now is reflect on everything that they have destroyed. The worst thing? They are unable to repair it. They never learned how to really connect because they were too busy manipulating. They never thought you'd have a breaking point since they spent so much time pushing your boundaries. They now have to face the fact that they lost not only you, but also the game they never ought to have played in the first place. When you left, they laughed, but now they're not laughing. They first dismissed it. Perhaps they even chuckled. They convinced themselves that it made no difference, and that your departure was just a brief inconvenience. Perhaps they even exaggerated it, seeming indifferent, cracking jokes, and assuming they were in charge. They told themselves that they couldn't be touched and that they wouldn't be impacted by your absence. However, the truth will eventually come to light. The quiet that used to seem liberating now feels oppressive. Not only is the area you left vacant, but it's distinctly empty. It is now hard to overlook the things they used to brush off as insignificant. Your presence, your support, and the way you made their lives simpler. They believed that it would be easy to move on, and that they could swap you out like a light bulb. However, nothing fits. Distractions are insufficient. What you brought, no one else brings. And the laughing stops at that point. They are now dealing with the consequences of what they lost, and it is no longer amusing. It's not amusing, it's not a game, it's the truth. The individual whose absence is now bothering them is the same person they believed they didn't need. What's the worst? They are unable to return. They never thought about what would happen if they were mistaken, since they spent so much time behaving as if you were interchangeable. They are now sitting in the mess they created and coming to the realization that when you left, you removed not just your presence, but also the version of life they didn't value until it was gone. And the joke is on them, regardless of how much they try to laugh it off today. They lost access to the version of existence that included you, not just you. They first believed they were just losing you, a person, a relationship, a phase of their lives. As if your departure would just result in an empty place at the table, they believed they could proceed with little alteration. Now, however, the truth is beginning to set in. Losing you meant losing the whole version of life that accompanied you, not just a single individual. They missed the way things felt when you were around, not just you. The way they could confide in you without reluctance. The way discussions flowed naturally. The way life felt lighter, warmer, and easier. They lacked the solace that comes from knowing that someone really cares about them and has a deeper understanding of them than others. They missed the stability, the comfort, the moments they dismissed as little but now see as crucial, and that life is no longer there. Even if they are still there and doing their duties, something doesn't seem right. There's less genuine laughing. The triumphs don't seem as satisfying. The difficult days seem heavier than they used to be. You were once a source of stability, a location where they felt comfortable, and a presence that brought order to the situation. Everything feels different, because everything is different without it. Knowing that they can't just return to that existence is the most difficult aspect. The door has been closed. They have to live with the version of life without you that they never imagined they would have to live because of the decisions they made. Despite their best efforts to move on, the fact remains, they didn't just lose you. They also lost the world because of you. And it cannot be restored by whatever they do now. Nothing fits, despite their belief that they could fill the gap. They believed they could take your place. They believed that by bringing in new acquaintances, transient diversions, and pointless chatter, they might occupy the void you left. Forcible laughing, frequent activity, and anything to keep from sitting with the weight of what they had lost appeared to work at first. But the vacuum persists, despite their best efforts to hide it. And it becomes more clear that nothing fits the more they attempt to fill it. None of them feel the same, yet they try to strike up fresh discussions. Although the words are present, there is no link. They make an effort to replicate the familiarity they previously had with you, but it's phony, forced, and empty. Although they know deep down that they are only avoiding the reality, they convince themselves that everything is okay and that they have moved on. It is impossible to replace what they have lost. They find it difficult, since they never anticipated feeling this way. They believed that they could easily adapt to losing you and use it as a diversion. Distractions, however, have a limit. It becomes quieter at night. The voices of the ideas get louder. All of a sudden, they are forced to confront the reality of what they lost, the very thing they were trying to escape. They believed that the emptiness might be filled with superficial relationships and pointless rituals. However, not every gap should be filled with something. Some areas are the property of those who really mattered. They're now discovering the hard way that what you brought into their lives wasn't just something. It was everything, despite their best efforts to seem differently. And they'll look for anything that even comes near for a long time. But they'll never find it. Before the turmoil turned against them, they felt at ease in it. They flourished and took advantage of the turmoil, living in it as if it were home. They were skilled at manipulating events, creating drama, and maintaining enough instability to maintain control at all times. For them, chaos was never a consequence. It was simply a game. So they believed they could injure you, push you away, and then continue as if nothing had happened. However, they never thought about what would occur if they lost control of the turmoil. They never paused to consider what would happen when you eventually left for good, since they were so used to controlling your emotions, generating stress, and keeping you off balance. And now that you're gone to take the toll, the mayhem they caused has nowhere else to go. They are being tricked by it. They don't know how to stop the instability that they previously used as a weapon from destroying their own tranquility. Nobody remains to point the finger at, argue with, or pursue them in an attempt to calm them down or clean up the mess. They've lost what it was to have anything solid because they kept things tumultuous for so long. And now that they have nothing solid to cling on, they are drowning in what they believe to be their strength. It's really ironic. They believed that they could play with fire without being burnt. But now that they are standing in the ruins of what they have destroyed, they realize that the chaos was always in control of them, and not the other way around. And now, they have nowhere to go without you. They now see that your patience was a virtue when they formerly believed it to be a weakness. They believed they had control over you because of your patience. They believed that your generosity was a sign of weakness, and that you were someone they could easily manipulate, since you were able to understand, forgive, and give them another opportunity. They saw your readiness to remain as evidence that you were more in need of them than they were. They never hesitated to take advantage of it as a consequence. They now see, however, that your patience was a virtue rather than a weakness, holding space for them, trying to understand them when they caused trouble, and supporting them when they didn't deserve it required strength. Even when they gave you every reason to doubt them, it required courage to trust in them. Most importantly, it needed courage to leave when you knew they would never value what you had given. They now realize that not everyone would have followed your example. Not everyone would have given them the same level of care, effort, or support that you did. They were mistaken to think that type of tolerance could be found any place. Because, in reality, it was you, not patience. And that won't be discovered again. They believed they were the powerful one, in charge, and in a position of constant advantage. They now understand who really had the power all along, however, as they sit with the weight of their defeat. It was you, not them. Because true strength isn't about dominance, sway, or success. Knowing when enough is the key. Not only did you take your presence with you when you left, but you also took the power that they mistook for weakness. They must now accept the fact that they never merited it in the first place. They realized they needed you, even if they believed you needed them. The whole time, they were completely mistaken. They believed that you were in need of them. They believed they were the target, the one being pursued, and the one with the power to control the course of events. They saw your commitment, tolerance, and presence as evidence that you were reliant on them. They never considered questioning what they were receiving from you as a result. They now realize, however, that you were required by them, not the other way around. They just were unaware of it until you were gone. They were unaware of how much they relied on you, how you helped to stabilize their lives, and how much easier life was because you were always there to silently support them, improve their situation, and lessen the effects of their poor choices. They never considered how much of their identity was molded by your presence, or how much of their confidence came from knowing you were on their side. However, the disparity is now indisputable. The loss of your enthusiasm, encouragement, and comprehension is burdening them in unexpected ways. They thought they could continue as if nothing had occurred without you. But reality is proving them wrong. The quiet is more oppressive. The days seem to go on forever. The individuals they used to hang out with don't provide the same warmth, depth, or feeling of belonging as you did. What's the worst? They are unable to reverse it. They can't go back in time and alter how they treated you. They are unable to change the past to fit their current understanding. They are left with no choice but to sit with the burden of knowing that they were never the one in charge or the one with strength. You were theirs, even if they believed they were your anchor. They're the ones who are adrift now that you're gone, lost in the place where you once were. They didn't accept karma until it was associated with them. They never believed that they were subject to karma. They thought they could act any way they pleased throughout their lives, damaging others, controlling circumstances, making self-serving decisions, and never be held accountable. They believed they could dodge responsibility indefinitely, that life would always work in their favor, and that they were untouchable. However, karma doesn't follow their schedule. There is no warning sent. It doesn't inquire about their readiness. It just shows up on schedule. They most likely ignored the symptoms at first. A little annoyance here, a missed chance there. Karma, however, isn't usually obvious at first. Like a whisper at first, it gradually intensifies into something they can't ignore. They are currently being used to play the same games. They are now experiencing the same betrayal that they previously wrote off as not a big deal in ways that are very hurtful. And the same suffering they inflicted, they are the ones experiencing it now. They now know what it's like to be disappointed, to have someone they trusted leave you in the dark, and to be left wondering. They understand what it's like to doubt everything, to lie awake reliving the moments when everything went wrong, and to feel helpless in a situation that they used to be in charge of. They also know deep down that this isn't a coincidence, despite their desire to think so. When you believe you can take and take without ever giving back, this is what occurs. This is the result of assuming that after spending so much time denying people kindness, the world owes you mercy. The concept of karma made them giggle. It was referred to as superstition. But now that their own decisions are in front of them, it's not just a theory. It's their reality. What's the worst? There's no getting out of it. Since the harm they caused has gone full circle, they are forced to confront the reality that karma isn't just real. It bears their name. You gave them control over themselves, but they sought power over you. They want authority over your feelings, responses, and choices. They want control over the outcome, the last word, and the upper hand. For a while, they could have. Perhaps they believed they had you exactly where they wanted you to be, questioning yourself, establishing your value, and attempting to be sufficient for an unsatisfied person. The one thing they didn't anticipate, however, was that you let go. All of the authority they believed they had over you vanished at that instant. Because you can only exert control over someone when they remain, participate, and are still concerned enough to respond. But you seize that authority and put it back in their hands, where it always belonged. They can't blame you anymore. They are unable to control the circumstances. Their anxieties cannot be projected onto you. All they have left is themselves, and that is the one conflict for which they were never equipped. You see, it was simple to manage you. It served as a diversion and a means of avoiding facing their own shortcomings, remorse, and emptiness. But now that you aren't there to protect them, they must deal with everything directly. Every self-centered decision, every deceptive tactic, and every instance in which they disregarded your emotions as if they were unimportant. No one is left to bear the consequences of their behavior. There was no one left to bear their shame. And the most difficult thing they will ever have to cope with is that they're confronting themselves, not losing you. They realize in their hearts that they lost more than simply a person. The one person who was prepared to embrace them in spite of their imperfections was gone. And that shame will follow them no matter how hard they attempt to avoid it. Not because it's what you desire, not because you want to get even. However, they made it themselves. Ultimately, they believed they were in charge. However, they never really had control. They thought they could play games, push boundaries, and take without repercussions. However, life has a way of bringing everything into balance. They are now the ones who are having trouble adjusting to life without what they previously disregarded. You weren't the only one they lost. They lost the security you offered, the comfort of your presence, and the wholeness of life that came from having you in it. They believed they could just go on, but now they must confront the reality they had been avoiding for so long. The one thing that kept them together was what they took for granted. Distractions cannot bridge the gap. Nothing can replace what has been lost. They might act as if they don't feel the consequences of their decisions, reject their regrets, and place the blame on the situation. They know in their hearts, however, that this is more than simply losing a loved one. For the first time, they must face themselves without the support of your love, compassion, and patience. And that, it's a reality that hurts far more than they ever thought. Let them sit with it then. Allow them to fully experience the consequences of their loss. Because of you, you're at liberty. You've taken back your authority. You have entered a life where your love is appreciated, your worth is acknowledged, and your vitality is safeguarded. And that's what separates you from them. You gain knowledge. You developed. You relax. However, they are just now coming to the realization that they were never in a position of authority. You were, and it will be far too late by the time they realize it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss anything like this, if this resonated with you and you felt every word. If you are aware that they are now experiencing the consequences of their own decisions, hit the like button. Tell me in the comments what the most important lesson you took away from walking away was. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, of course, because letting someone know they're not alone might sometimes be the finest thing you can do for them.